Hey everybody, got a redneck wet mold here and we are going to make a pen holder out of it. So I put this together last night. It's pieces anyone can find at home. You don't always need to wet mold with a wet mold. I had a lot of questions about, well, I don't have the tools, I can't afford to make wet mold, I don't have any woodworking skills. That's totally fine. This is 2 paint sticks, a board that I just had in the garage. Um, 'Tis the season. Oh, it's dried, so the important part of the wet mold is that these sticks are going to give us a nice line to stitch by. But you know we had to use that static guard. Winter, I'm zapping everything. But today, with this weird looking pile of stuff that we made, we are going to be making a nice desktop pen holder. This is not my idea. I've seen pictures of something like this online. But I just thought it would be a unique project to make because we've been doing a bit of wet molding and also because I keep losing my pens. So we can get rid of all this stuff because all we need is this and a flat piece of leather. So the first thing you need to do is wet mold your wet mold. I know that sounds kind of crazy, but it'll snap back into place. When wet molding, things bend, and I never like to try to establish a straight line before I've wet molded something because it's always going to be out of whack. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to smush this flat. I'm going to get a flat line established with a nice sharp knife. Now this is 9-ounce leather, so a couple cuts might be necessary. Then we're going to use this straight side. And we are going to measure in. I don't need it huge. We're just going to go about 5 inches. And I'm using the lines on my cutting board to show me where 5 inches is. And we're going to cut this guy too. Now this is kind of a good intro to wet molding because it's very low stakes, but this part is very dangerous is a strong word, but it's not the safest thing in the world. And then we can always go back and get our static guard bottle, and remember, that's the shape we're going for. I'm going to use this line as what is going to be my stitch line. And I'm going to grab calipers at a 1/2 inch, and I'm going to establish the end of my pen holder on each side. Now this might be a little bit wonky, it might not be perfectly straight, but that is the beauty of making something for the first time. You always learn, and you always make it better the second time. And I like to show you guys me making stuff for the first time because we all do it, and I don't think we need to hide it. That opens that much, yes. Okay. So now that we have that going, we're going to trim this part off. And that'll give us a lot of nice glue surface on our base that we're going to create to get a nice good stick and to make sure that this maintains shape as best it can. The decisions you have to make before we assemble everything is just how drastic you want your curve to be. Now for me, I'm going to hold Sharpies in this. So if I pull out my bottle, I know that Sharpie's going nowhere if I punch holes and I slide it in. But if you have longer pencils or whatever, you can use a bigger tube, you can do it however you want. So I think for me, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the lines on my cutting board to tell me how wide I want this to get a good curve. And this is telling me that I want my edges to be 4 inches apart. So before we cut our base, we need to punch our holes that our pens and pencils are going to slide into, which means we're flattening it again. But as you can see, when you wet mold something this thick, it's not going anywhere. You can unfold it, you can fold it, it's staying where it is. Now, I've been thinking about this all night, whether I want to do opposite holes so that I have pens going in either direction, kind of like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And I think I'm just going to do one line across the top, and I'm going to do a 1/2 inch punch because that's what works with a Sharpie. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a mark in the center. Please be remotely close to something I can get the center of, actually. Metric. Okay, 14. So 7 is the center. That. And we can go using our line up here. Then we're going to switch back. And I'm going to do 1/2 inch holes, 1/2 inch apart. Well, that's kind of silly. I'm going to do 1/2 inch holes, 1/4 inch apart. That'd make more sense. So I am going to go a 1/2 inch in for structural reasons. And then I'm going to go 3/4 inches. That's how I want to space it. So that's a 1/2 inch, 3/4, 3/4, 3/4, 3/4, 3/4, which leaves us roughly half, but we can trim that off. So what you can do is you can stagger the holes on either side so that your pens kind of sit like this. I'm fully aware that I'm just going to have a Sharpie mohawk going right down the middle here. And that's fine to me because my life in the shop is grabbing a Sharpie and being able to put it back and know where it is. But if you're making this as a gift, if you're making this for any sort of other purpose, feel free to alternate where your holes are. You can add little holes for different sorts of tools and stuff, but an 8 to 10 ounce leather is going to hold all this stuff and look really nice on your desk as well. I think I'm going to throw some logos in here because we got plenty of branding space, and I don't usually put my logos and stuff. So we're going to throw some Corter logos in here to look even more brand appropriate on the workbench. And then it's time to cut our base, and we're almost ready to start sewing. For our base, we know that we want it to be a 4-inch total base. So this is a brand new blade. You want to find a sole bend or the toughest leather you can find. And I'm not even going to worry about trimming the sides for now. We're going to take our adjustable dividers that we have as a 1/2 inch, and we know that we have that much to glue on either side. And it is glue time. And then we get to try to punch through however many ounces of leather this is, which is going to be fun. Or when you glue, you're gluing on the bottom of this. Do not glue on the top. You're gluing on the bottom. Just like that. Then on here, we're just going to try to keep our glue behind that line. And that's actually pretty important because that line is where our stitch line is going to go. So if you're using veg tan, which you probably are because you're wet molding, although you can wet mold other leathers, any glue you get beyond that line, you're going to be able to see in the final product. Now, it's going to be deep in a pen tunnel, but, you know, it's still going to be there. I think that's about good. So let's let that dry for a minute. Now, this one, you're really going to want to let dry. And if you want to be very safe, you could do a second coat on the top grain side just to make sure that you're really getting that sticking action good. However, we have a 1/2 inch to hammer, so I'm not really worried about that. There's not a ton of tension on this, so we should be good with one coat, but I've never made one of these before, so we will see together on camera when we go to glue it together. So it's time to glue these two pieces together, and I want everything to be even. I'm going to take the straight edge, and I'm not going to go beyond this line that we marked, but I'm just going to make a little line here so that I know I'm lining up one side, because this is kind of freestyle leather work. I just want to make sure that it's even. So we're going to go one side at a time, like that, and I'm going to hammer that down good. So we know it's stuck. Then I'm going to come over here and match that up to the line that we drew on the other side, so we know that it's nice and even. And you can see we're getting a real nice shape here. Now, before I do any cutting, I am going to just look it down and make sure it's flat. And you can do this without wet molding. Kayleen had actually asked. You absolutely can do it without wet molding, but if you do it without wet molding, a lot of the times this will pull up. So when you wet mold it, everything just lays nice and flat, and you're good to go. So the tricky part is going to be cutting this piece here, and I have not figured out an easier way to do this yet. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to put my straight edge there, and I'm going to lean in a little bit and follow my straight edge as best as I can. We will be able to sand this down, no problem. Be careful you do not jump your straight edge, even though it's cork racked, and bring it straight in your hand, because that is not fun. Once I get a line, I can go in freehand and just follow that line, and it'll be a little bit safer. Look how nice that looks. So, we have a couple decisions to make. I think that this would look good with a couple little rivets here. So I'm going to figure out a good rivet size, and I'm going to punch the holes, and then we're going to stitch. And then we can put our rivets in, and we'll have just a nice little pen holder to keep on our desk. Nothing crazy, but it looks nice. It's made out of leather. You're a leathersmith. You should have things made out of leather. And according to my square on my cutting board, we are pretty square. I'm probably going to round the edges a little bit to make it to match all the other curves, but we're doing pretty good. So let's pick out some rivets. I like to keep a fair amount of different size rivets on hand, and all I do is I just kind of pop in the tops and see which one would look nice. And I think that this is what you're looking for. Is you're just looking for a rivet that's not too big, and that's barely on the cusp of being too big, but it matches fairly well the size of the hole for the Sharpie. So I think we're going to go with these, and these are 11 millimeter caps. It's a 12.7 millimeter post, which we don't need, but it'll squish just fine. What we're going to do next is we're going to pick where we want our rivets to go, because what I would like to do is sand around these so it's rounded, and I want the rivet, it's not going to be part of the stitch line, but I do want it to meet up with the stitch line. So I'm kind of looking over the top. I have my one Sharpie hole here, and I would like for my rivets to line up with that first hole. I'm just going to push down, and that's all I need to do to get my mark, and that's how I know where to punch for my rivet. We're going to take, as we've been doing, one of our the male ends of our rivets, and we're going to pick a hole that is just barely bigger than the rivet itself. And we were already set up for another riveting project, so this should do nicely. I'm going to punch the holes in this, but I'm not going to set the rivet yet because we want to do the stitching first. And this stitching is not going to be, Jesus, even punching the hole, not going to be that fun. You might not want to do this with a rotary punch. It's probably smarter to do it with, I'm going to do it with a regular punch. I'm not going to start my stitching off the edge here. I'm going to start my stitching right where my rivet starts. And I'm just going to follow that line and smash the ever-living heck out of it. And these stitching chisels are sharp, so they're going all the way through no problem. And then here, it just so happens that if I put 4 prongs in prongs that exist, which will help me keep my stitch line straight, I'll line up with this rivet. So we're ready to stitch. I haven't actually used the white version of Main Thread's new braided wax cord, so we're going to use that. This is the 0.20. I just like nice, I think a nice, as this ages, a nice classic white and patinaed look will look nice with the brass rivets as they age. And make sure to take a little extra if you're sewing a piece this thick, because you got a lot to go through. We're using our LDH scissors. Buckler carries them. Sometimes they're in stock. They sell it fast. If you see them, grab them. They are game changers of scissors. They're just so easy to use. They're so comfortable. Highly suggest them. So when I start stitching, I'm going to start stitching from the bottom. And now what you can do, and what I would do if I was prepared, is after this is all done, what would actually be really cool is if you got a piece of gum sole and glued it across the bottom. But you can glue like a piece of cork or something so that the stitching is protected. I don't think it's going to be that big of an issue, like with the pen holder sliding places, because your rivets are going to keep it off the ground enough for your stitching to not touch the ground. But other than that, as long as you get a good stitch hole punched in there, it's just a very simple stitch line. So we're all the way sewn in, and it doesn't look like it because when you're punching through something this thick, you're going to be getting all the way up the tooth. The good thing is, because you're using like a diamond or an olive or something, these teeth are going to shrink over time and the stitching will become more pronounced. But what I am going to do is start off that process by closing up these holes as best I can. So we have both sides fully sewn through. I've gone through and I've roughly sanded all of the edges. Now, you can either sew this on a rotary sander like we have, or you can take a piece of sandpaper just flat on the ground and just back and forth until it's even. Very simple. I didn't do any of the beveling yet because I want to set the rivets, and then we're going to round the corners to match the rivets. Then we'll do the beveling, the final sanding, and the burnishing by hand. And here we go. I'm going to be completely honest with you. This came out way nicer and looks way cooler than I thought it was going to. As you can see, the bottom stays nice and flat because we took the time to wet mold it. Remember, we wet molded it with a couple of paint sticks, a spare board, and some clamps. You don't need to make a wet mold for everything. You can wet mold with things around the house. We got our logo in there. The rivets look great. I think it really lends to the kind of industrial, soft industrial, we'll call it. The other thing is, by adding the rivets, I didn't even realize it keeps the stitching off the ground. So you can add cork or something like that, but these rivets are going to protect that stitching. Now, how does it work with the Sharpies? Because all I do is carry Sharpies around and lose them all the time. Well, the 1/2-inch punch works perfect. And now I'm going to be a lunatic with just 6 black Sharpies on my desk. Like that. And there we go. Solid as a rock. So you can take this concept and you can do it with leather tools. You can do it with, we were thinking about what you could put in it. If you wanted to, you could put, that one might be a little too thick. You could put a piece of plastic on the bottom here, and you could use it to hold your punches. Tools, you would have to make it a little deeper or a little bit of a different shape, but that still holds. You could put...
You could even put cork on here.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, like plastic or cork or something to protect it. Because then you could also put, like, your knife could go there, that kind of thing. So this is like just a really cool way to do any sort of tool holding, like any sort of holder in a leather shop. But I gotta believe this is one of those gifts where, like, the dudes that are hard to, like, or women, people that are hard to buy for, this is kind of a cool thing to make for them. And again, I want to 100% make it known that I did not design this. I saw a picture of something similar, and I've made my own version. That's why there's no pattern. I just wanted to try it out. I thought a lot of you guys might like it. It's a cool project. And now I got a place for 6 Sharpies, so I know where they're always going to be. So that's going to be it for this one. We've been kind of going on and off with beauty shots. You guys are seeing enough of it now, and that's what it looks like. So I'll post a picture of it on Instagram when the video drops, and I will link to all of the materials that we used in the description, first link. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.